Hi everyone, and welcome to CSR Soapbox. I'm Maddy, the Candidate Relationship Manager at CSR. I'm joined with my colleague Charlotte. Charlotte, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm the head of people here at CSR, and I support the clients from a retention point of view.
Today we're going to be talking about attracting talent and also retaining staff as well. Those two obviously go hand in hand. We've got a couple of people that have been in the industry for quite a few years within the fire and security industry. Greg, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Maddy. My name's Greg Marys. I'm the Regional Service Manager at Marlow Fire and Security. I cover the Midlands area. I've been in the fire and security industry for over 30 years. Mainly as we are talking about dealing with recruitment, service delivery and customer support.
No worries. What about you, John?
I'm John Winning. I work for Stanley Security. I'm the Regional Service Manager for the South and Southwest. A little bit uniquely here, I've started off as an engineer and have worked my way through the industry. Have been through many interviews with lots of companies, so I've been on both sides of this, so well placed, I think, to join in this conversation.
No worries. Thanks, John. Kev?
Thanks, Maddy. Kevin Rowland from EFT Security Group. I'm based in Nottingham. I'm currently a service contracts manager for the Midlands and the North region. Bit of a hybrid role as opposed to being a service manager directly, in that I'm customer focused as well as having an engineering team as well. So definitely the same as John there. 24 years in the service industry and well versed with interviews and trying to get candidates over the line. So recruitment is key to this. So thank you for inviting us.
No worries. So do you all work on the pretty much all work on the servicing side, service and fault finding side? Lovely. Bit of common ground there. So yeah, Charlotte, I'll let you obviously ask the first question in regards to the attraction of staff.
Yeah, we just really want to sort of pick everyone's brains really to find out sort of what you're doing to sort of attract the best talent in the market at the moment. We know that there is a shortage of engineers, so wondered what you guys were doing in your industries really. So Greg, what are you doing?
Okay, so my approach and Marlow's approach is really being, I would say, with the engineers that we're approaching and the people that we're going to approach, is being open and honest and selling the company, the ethics that Marlow have. We've got the brand new training academy, which is quite attractive as well, where the engineers get the chance to get a personal development plan. It can be 3 months, 6 months, 5 months, a year, whatever they want to do to achieve a goal. We'll put that plan in place for them, and then it gets reviewed 3 times a year, and we make sure that we follow up on the promises that we make. One of the biggest things I find in the industry is a lot of engineers come to us and I hear go to other companies and they get promised the earth. And the delivery just isn't there. So one of the main things for me is following up on what you're promising the person that you're trying to attract in.
And just with like the training plans you mentioned, who oversees that in company for you guys?
So the training.
Sorry, Greg.
The training department is there for the RSM or anybody else in the company as well. It could be an office worker to go. They can put forward what they think their future looks like and where they want to be within the Marlow industry. So we don't want people looking on the outside and going elsewhere. We've got a big array of jobs, so we're happy for an engineer to say, my future's with sales. We will lead them towards sales and retain them in the company as a salesperson. I've also had engineers from different disciplines who have come over to the system side. We put a training plan together, and they're very happy and coming on very nicely as a systems engineer. Something they've never done before, but you know, they've got the keenness and the willing to learn, and that they're willing to spend the time and put the effort in to get to where they want to be. So we're quite happy to put the effort in with them.
Yeah, some really good things there. What about yourself, John? What are you?
I think sorry, I think a lot like Greg says. I think the approach now has to be to try and bring engineers in, build trust with them. As Greg says, I can't agree enough. The number of engineers that I'll talk to during interview stages, and they're coming from a company who has let them down. I've as I said, I've been on this side where you'll join a company and they will promise you the earth, all of the training, and then you get in there, it's another 6 months until the training happens. So exactly the same. We build a personal development plan with engineers coming in. We follow that through set time scales, and we make sure that we are meeting the targets, not only that they're setting us, but we're setting them, and everyone is happy. Personally, I like to build teamwork and a real team ethic within my engineering team. And so I like to promote communication, and it's something Stanley feels very, very strongly about. Is we'll touch on this with some of the other questions coming up. Communication is key here. We have also during at the start of COVID, just before this, we developed an online platform for training, which allowed engineers to actually take training into their own hands. We went to major manufacturers in the industry and got their online training all in one place, in a one-stop shop. And this allowed engineers to seek their own training without having to go through and seek permission from management, like we used to always in the old days. Everything had to be signed off.
Yes.
So that put their own future in their own hands to a certain extent, and they could seek out the information they wanted. And if there was an area that appealed to them, such as if they wanted to go to the dark side and go to sales for some crazy reason from service, we could support them through that. And they could, or even worse, if they looked at install, I don't know why, but again, these things, we are all service here. We can make these jokes. We could support them in this. But yeah, it allowed them to take that first step, and then in their PDPs, they could make these requests with a bit more backing and a bit more knowledge of what they were asking for, and it makes it for us easier to support them in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that's a big attraction piece where we're putting the ownership back in the engineer's hand to drive their training? Do you say that's a key?
I hope so. To be honest, I found this to be a bit of a stumbling block as well, because engineers are somewhat, in my experience, a little bit uneasy of suddenly having this openness to their training where they can pick and choose what they want to, as if they almost think that they're going to do something wrong if they go ahead. It's, you have to explain that you can't always be off the road doing this new training course, but it's certainly once they get used to the platform that's been developed, they've enjoyed it, and some of the guys have really gotten their teeth into it and done a lot of training.
So is the training something that you make, like Stanley makes themselves? Is it just like aligned? Is it pretty generic to like sales, engineering, install, service, or is it like more external training?
Yeah.
Well, we had a new L&D manager came into the business and really sort of changed how we were doing things, created a system that we call the Vault. And through the Vault, yes, there was internal training put into place, but there was also, as I said, we went to external manufacturers and asked for their online training, put it all in one place for them.
Oh, that's good.
We've then broken this down into sections. So we have the health and safety section, and through that, there'll be all your standard day-to-day IHASCO as a company. We use IHASCO courses, but alongside that, there'll be the courses if they were interested more in the health and safety element, maybe looking more into courses to develop that side of them as well. They can look into that, and they can control it as well. And like I said, we put that emphasis on them as well as us, and promote personal growth.
Okay, cool. What about yourself, Kevin?
Yes, it's quite interesting listening to Greg and John there. In a lot of ways, very, very similar in approach, but I think it's going back to you, sort of the first question is, what have we done? It's how you set yourself out from the start. It's being honest, it's being professional, setting your stall out so that the candidates know exactly what to expect without overselling it. We all could become a salesman, but we also have to deliver. So we have to be honest in our own approach in that manner. But very similar. We bit of academic training, mentoring, as well as manufacturers training. So it's a blend of knowledge gain, as well as just the general knowledge gain as well. We want our standards to sort of rise and be adaptive. I think the key is where you start on day one is not where you are on day 5 or day 25. Everything changes, and through PDRs, we actively do 2 PDRs per annum, and that's adaptive to the customer client base as well as the need of the engineer, because he might find something that he thought he was confident was on has now moved on more something, and there's a new model, and that's where we get engaged and support them. But certainly from the outset is not promising the earth, it's promising what's real and what he's going to be met with on day 10.
Yeah, I think things are moving quite fast, and I think sometimes the engineers get left behind, and then they have to be expected to just go onto site and know all this stuff, and they're like, I don't know it.
Yeah.
I don't know it. So in terms of, we've obviously from like a recruitment point of view, the main thing that we have coming up when attracting staff is, at the moment, especially after COVID, I think everyone found that like spending time with their families was like a major thing as well. Like work-life balance a bit more, rather than working 16-hour days and then being on call and stuff like that. So John, like how have your company like tried to attain the work-life balance? Like, how do you personally try and do that for your engineers?
From a company, we work to the health and safety standard rules. So obviously the working day has a set number of hours you can work. We're very health and safety conscious, as any major company will be nowadays for obvious reasons. But we engineering and engineers' well-being is a very, very high priority. So we actually, part of this, we offer an employee assistance program, which is completely confidential, completely free and outside of Stanley. So this allows engineers to talk about any aspect, whether this is work, whether this is mental health, whether this is family worries, financial troubles. This is something that Stanley Black & Decker absolutely support. And we constantly promote this. We will, as I said, this isn't my first webinar. We've had webinars to promote well-being and mental health throughout the business. We've had many champions who have very, very, very bravely stepped up and talked about their own experiences, because that, unfortunately, we are a male-dominated industry, and we are, and unfortunately men can be a little bit backwards at coming forward sometimes, and so we've absolutely promoted that. But from a sort of a more micro level with my own team, as I said before, communication with me. We have so many forms of communication. I stress the importance for all of my team to communicate with each other and to rely on each other as well. Whether it's as simple as a WhatsApp group for that I'm not part of, so if they need to have a little grumble about me, they're welcome to wider company-wide communications, which allows engineers to communicate with an engineer they may never meet, but they can strike up a relationship and a conversation with, and share their troubles or share their problems or concerns, and pass that on. So yeah, absolutely, just promote a team again, especially coming off of the back of COVID. A lot of people became insular again, where we were in our own little bubbles, especially with people being taken off work, furlough. Engineering teams were stripped right down, so there weren't many people working. A lot more pressure on the few who were. Travel went up. All of these things went up naturally. So it was even more important at this point, one, to make sure we were talking to the people who were working, but to talk to the people who weren't working as well, because furlough unfortunately had a negative impact on a lot of people as well. So again, I can't stress enough, this is a personal thing for me, but communication for Stanley as a whole, just making sure there's somebody to talk to whenever you need to.
What about you, Greg?
Well, I think obviously Jonathan has covered a lot of points there that Marlo also do, but I think also the culture in the company has to be right as well, and that has to start from the top of the business. So, you know, all the way down from a CEO to an MD to an operations director, moving through the RSMs and then getting to the engineering team. We're an industry that needs to be flexible. Customers aren't 9 to 5 these days. Engineers, we find, might be starting early, might be finishing early, might be starting late, working late. So I think you need that right culture in the business to engage with the teams that are actually going out and facing the customers and being that flexible. And it's with the right culture, it's a give and take industry. If you haven't got that culture in the business, I find that type of management can be short term. So working closely with the engineers and getting to know them as people and working with them and knowing what their personal life is like and who they are goes a long way when you need to ask, you know, can you be flexible, or they need to come to you and say, I've got this problem, can you support me, Greg? And it works very well being on that level with the team that's out in the field, and I think that goes a long way with retaining staff as well.
I think you need to win as a manager and as a company. You need to be very personable, don't you? You need to make sure that you're speaking to people and just building a relationship with them as well, which is pretty
massively
simple. I think a lot of stuff's been overrid by, oh, I want loads of money, I want, you know, all this stuff. And I think the simple stuff, like literally just taking the time to call someone up and say, like me and you was talking about it, Charlotte, like saying thank you to someone for doing a job. Kev, I'm sure you'll agree as well. Like, I'm sure you do that as well. But just even saying thank you to someone, because most of the time managers are thought of just moaning
of course.
about stuff.
I think it is showing some appreciation from time to time just go a long way. And I think just touching what Greg there about senior management, something we are introducing post COVID is that the senior management team are trying to get out of the office and down to grassroots level a little bit more than what they were before COVID. So we've got that sort of backing from the senior management team. I suppose I was very lucky going into COVID because I always sold the balanced lifestyle from day one. So I never pushed too many hours on the engineers, the workload. I always worked with the engineers to sort of say what they could do. So I was very lucky from that perspective. But I think more so now it's as culture change is coming in, I think we need to be ready for that.
Yeah. It's just so key, isn't it? You know, I think, you know, talking to different clients and things at the moment, and certainly it's quite surprising that sometimes the junior management teams, that they're very quick to get on the phone and tell an engineer of something that hasn't gone right or a problem. But, you know, I did an exercise with a client a little while ago, and it was quite interesting. They could all tell me that they'd spoke to an engineer and had a go at them 48 hours ago. But when I asked them when was the last time they just picked up the phone and thanked them, some of them it was 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And that's, you know, that's not going to get that culture that you were talking about, Greg, in the company if you're just constantly on the phone and sort of moaning, if you like, to the engineers. So it's good that we've got the cultures in the company that sort of drive that, isn't it?
Yeah, that would definitely be a staff retainer, is the right culture.
Yeah, close in people that all get along with each other as well. Because I think if you bring someone in, and it's obviously will mess like one toxic person. I think we've all probably experienced it. One toxic person you bring into like a team that can have a massive effect on a whole team, if you get what I mean.
It can, but as long as you're managing people on an individual basis, then you can, to a certain extent, control that and deal with it. And you know, as quick as you get somebody in, if they're not fitting into the team as you thought they would, then you know, before anything drastically starts going wrong with the team, you need to get that person aside and try and they might have some issues at home that are affecting the work life or something. You just don't know until you sort of speak to people, drill down and find out what the issues are. And they might even be grateful that somebody's took time to speak to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes we get so bogged down, don't we, with finishing tasks and deadlines. But do we take sometimes that time to talk to our teams and just ask them, are they okay?
So many times I've taken an engineer on and had somebody comment that, oh, that person is this, that person's that. But I'll always say, you know, draw a line in the sand, I'll make up my own mind. And, you know, that some people I've been told are no good for the industry, no good for the company, have turned out to be absolutely excellent staff, you know, work really hard, do things I ask them to. You know, and in reverse, you know, get things from me that, so, you know, it's, you've got to make up your own mind. There is a little bit of animosity, I would say, probably between some engineers and some companies. So it's always best to make your own mind up and see where you go from there.
It's very incestuous, this industry, isn't it?
I was going to say, we're going to go move on to talk about retention, but we are, as me and Greg said hello to each other before this, we've, everybody's worked with everybody in this industry, or if we haven't, we know somebody who knows somebody who has worked with somebody, and we all do it as part, you know, we've probably all picked up a phone and said, have you heard of this person and that, and reputations can unfortunately follow, good and bad. And we are at this point where you have to try and find out the reasons. I interviewed somebody the other day and he was very honest with me, said that he'd failed his probation with his last company and they'd let him go. Said it was a personality clash, and him and his manager, there was no communication there, and it was a one-way conversation constantly. And so when his probation was failed, he actually wasn't that unhappy about it and was honest about that in the conversation, and that ended up, we had that conversation about how he felt that had come around, and turned out he'd been asked to do a lot of unreasonable hours. He tried to explain why he wasn't able to do them, and that led to the animosity that led to that poisoned relationship with him and the rest of his team. So I think it is a case of trying to deal with everybody on an individual basis, even when, as Greg said, you do hear things about people from other people. We have to rise above that to a certain extent.
And that reputation, doesn't it, go with you? Your companies get a name. So when we're talking about attracting the right talent, isn't it? Like you were saying, engineers talk to engineers. So from an attraction point of view, you are not going to attract those right engineers if we've got that bad company culture to sort of bring them into the business.
You're always going to get an engineer that's perhaps disgruntled, didn't get what he wanted, moved on, and then he's going to put a bad word in about the company that he's just left. That's always going to happen. But I think on a whole, with the amount of people that work under you and with you and know the company, I find that the trying to attract staff in is, okay, you've got the agencies to go to, but also recommendations through engineers can be a lot easier that way, because they're quite happy to go out to somebody they know working for the company and say, it's good here, I'm proof that it's good, you know me. Because it's a leap of faith when engineers move company. I've known engineers move for more money, and then 2 months down the line, they could be asking for their job back.
So it's that attraction, isn't it? So when we're sort of attracting people into the companies, does any of you offer any sort of unique selling points to kind of attract them at all?
I think the unique selling point is, for me, it's a two-way thing. When you go and meet that person or talk to that person, it's not just all about technical ability. That can be trained and that can be given to somebody. They've got to have the right work ethics and the right personality, and you can get a feel for a person when you go and sit and talk to them. You can't just talk to somebody over a phone and do an interview over a phone. The effort needs to be made to go out and see what that person's like and what they're all about. you might think, great, this person sounds good on the phone. When you go and meet them, you just don't get the right feel from them or the right vibe that they're going to come in and give you what you want in your team for your company.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So from your point of view, Kevin, is there anything that you would do or offer to the market to sort of attract the right candidates into your business?
I think you're right. Greg sort of touched on it. I think a lot of it is selling the business, the ethics side, and what they're getting involved in, and where we place in the marketplace. So selling the company is easy, and that's what the sales team do very, very well. Mm. But what we do is, from a manpower perspective, we want to build a team. We want a successful team. And where we lose out and where we miss engineers, and we review. We have a process ourselves where if we lose an engineer, we get the feedback. We do a postmortem to see, is it a trend? Is it, has this happened before, or is it a personality clash? So we kind of just badge somebody as a personality clash, when actually it could have happened 2 or 3 times. So it's doing a postmortem and learning, because we all need to learn. And what we did yesterday is not what we're going to do tomorrow. It's the main thing.
Yeah. What about yourself, John?
I think Kevin and Greg have both touched on all the points I could make there. Again, I would agree with Kevin. The as we call them, a leavers interview. We actually do try and talk to the person to find out why they put their notice in, if somebody does, to find out what they see as failing, because you can only ever learn from your mistakes. And then having a post-mortem after the effect, maybe with the manager, the national manager, just to see HR representatives, to see if there is something we can do. But yeah, I think you hope that your company sells itself. You can do a lot of that, but it is trying to it's having a gimmick or having a promise to bring somebody in is never going to work in the long term. It may work short term, but you need to try and sell what somebody's coming into. And like I said, I try and sell the importance of team within my organization, whether that's on a smaller scale as just my service team, or on a larger scale as a clan culture, as we've all discussed here before. I think that's important.
So me and Charlotte also spoke about, because I think there's a lot of emphasis on unique selling points as, oh, they're paying 40k basic, and I don't actually think that's a unique selling point anymore. And we spoke about just doing like different things. Like I know some companies have their birthdays off and they don't need to take it as holiday, which I know it's the little things, isn't it, Charlotte? It is
absolutely. And it is. I mean, I was working with probably about 4 months ago now, and they sort of done a staff survey in a company that I worked with, because attraction was key. They just wasn't getting anyone through the door. And one of the things they offered all their employees, current employees and new employees, was Sky subscription as part of the company. So they'd obviously partnered with Sky, managed to get the subscription, and was paying their Sky bill for them, which I know is really out there at the moment, but it kind of helped with the retention as well. It's one less bill for people to pay, which we know finances are quite difficult at the moment. But also when things are tough and you haven't got any money, they can always watch the sport at home, because it included all the sports channels. And
that's true, yeah.
Are they still recruiting? Or
do you want to go to them? Yeah.
Honestly, the attraction it got, just because it was slightly different and it wasn't the norm, the company car, the mobile, it was just different, and it made people sort of look at that company and see, again, driving the culture and different things that company was doing, to say, look, we know things are tough at the moment. They obviously got a very good company package with Sky. There was obviously clause in if they left, etc. There was all of that drawn up. But I thought, I've never heard of that happening before in companies. I've heard of people doing Netflix subscriptions.
Yeah,
but I thought that was quite a clever way in terms of that attraction piece. And
joking aside, it's all about getting the engineers' attention at the first. But
exactly,
I think we all hope to a certain extent our branding, our company name is that for our own companies. But I applaud anybody who tries anything different. I would. I'm not sure some of us will get far selling that to our GMs, but it's.
Well, I think
it's a nice idea.
The company that did it worked out that if they actually increased everyone's salary by a certain percent, it was actually cheaper to do the subscription. So that's how it came about, and that's how it worked really for that company. But it was probably a slightly smaller company than some of yourselves, but so it's easy sort of to control. But again, it's that attraction, isn't it? It's playing to those. It's not always just offering someone an extra £2,000 in their salary at times. It is trying to make yourselves sometimes slightly different and unique, isn't it?
Although experience tells me there'll be at least one engineer that will try and find the monetary value of that and ask for that as a pay rise instead of the.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think another one as well is childcare. Some companies are doing childcare, which is a lot at the moment. Obviously, a lot of people are in a household with two people that are working with small kids, and childcare is definitely an advantage. That's come up a lot when I speak to people. Within the last at least 6 months, because all the money is going up and stuff, and obviously childcare is probably going up as well. So I think childcare voucher is definitely a good one for attraction as well.
That does come up quite often when I initially speak to people on the phone, and that, because you're right, Maddy, they do bring up. I've got a young child, and on a Wednesday, my wife can't drop him off at school or that. But it's like I said earlier, working with the engineers and working closely, you can sort of have that flexibility with the engineer. And yes, no problem if you need to drop your child off at school on a Wednesday at 9 o'clock. Just, please make the hours up when you can. And as long as that flexibility is there it's quite a modern day thing now to be talking and recruiting family members more so than what it was some decades ago. So I think companies now need to have moved with the times and be sort of incorporated this kind of thing when they're interviewing people, and it does go a long way.
Do you find with clients though, do you find they still have that expectation of people being on site early or not?
But again, you're dealing with a team. So, and the teams the engineers work quite closely together. And okay, perhaps the engineering CV isn't initially available till 9 o'clock, but his colleague who's working next door to him, we can get him to cover, that call. Nothing's ever a problem really, as long as it's out in the open, discussed and organised. And I think when it does become a problem is when you get somebody in a company that has got that issue and tries to hide it, sweep it under the carpet, and then it does come out further down the line, and it creates a problem for the engineer that's out on the road, just going about his job thinking he's doing good, working with his manager. Being above board and not hiding things, I think it is another part of staff retention as well, and making sure that everybody around you knows what's going on.
Definitely.
I think, Maddy, your old industrial sites still work on an 8 to 4 basis, but your more often modern office type environments, they are a bit more accommodating.
I suppose, and people aren't as in the business and buildings as much anymore, are they? So they can do it when there's a bit more flexibility, can't they?
They can, but the old industrial units, they're very rigid and old-fashioned, unfortunately. So we'll probably have to go on the retention side now. So obviously we obviously want to attract staff, but then obviously it's the retaining the staff as well, because there's a lot of cost in recruitment fees and other fees to get more staff on as well. So obviously
we want to retain staff as much as that. So Charlotte, did you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just wondered if anyone had any ideas or good ideas to help retain their staff, really. Anything that anyone's doing at the moment.
Well, I think from your point of view, Charlotte, from a recruitment agency, do you actually know in depth the companies that you're trying to place a candidate in? I mean, do you know the culture? Do you know the regional people that person's going to work for? Are you on a one-to-one basis with them, or are you dealing with HR or recruitment department? The HR and the recruitment department don't know so much further down how the RSM or the area manager works.
Yeah.
So I think if you sort of dealt more on a one-to-one basis with the actual person that you're recruiting for, and you get an insight into that manager, and when you try to sell that company to an engineer, I think you'd have more success if you spoke about flexibility and not something that's down on a piece of paper in black and white for the engineer to read, but what the company can actually, yes, offer you training wise and things like that. But you've probably been in the industry for a while, and you know that if you place an engineer at a company, how long have they lasted? And if they didn't, what was the reason for them leaving?
Yeah, I think that's where the sort of the exit interviews, if you like, are so key from a business point of view. It's almost trying to stop it before it even gets to that point. It's trying to, like I think you mentioned before, Greg, about that culture in the company, and that driving that culture through, as well as sort of giving them training plans and training platforms and salary reviews and engagement is just so key.
It's a leap of faith on both sides, for the engineer moving company and for myself as a manager taking on a new person. You've got on face value what he's coming into and what you're expecting from that person. Sometimes it doesn't work out, and you get engineers coming from small companies into corporate companies and vice versa. And they just think it's not a fit. There's some big companies out there, as we know, and some of the engineers they've had have been there like 18 years, and then you hear of an engineer that's only lasted 3 months. It suits some people, it doesn't suit others. So I think the expectation from day one needs to be clear to the engineer that you're trying to recruit into that company, what that company is about and what they're going to get out of the company. And and I think that would be a high retaining point then.
I think also, like, I think where people are so kind of like desperate to get engineers, their recruitment process at the start is very like, oh, we just need to get this engineer on sometimes, and then they get to it, and then they take them on, and they probably think, maybe we haven't done as technical interview or as much, you know what I mean, in depth, because you're like, I just need him, and like we experience it sometimes, and we say to people like, did you actually kind of like, what is the process? Because I know you're desperate for it, but then the same thing keeps happening again. So it's like you're obviously at the front end rushing to get that person on, and as much as everyone's in a rush, no one wants to rush that sort of thing, because it is a big thing, isn't it?
How do you, I hope you don't mind me asking this.
No, go for it.
Obviously you're an agency and there's other agencies out there. You have to find candidates. So you must be approaching companies to try and take engineers away from companies as well.
So the companies that we work with, like client wise, that we're not allowed to approach, but say if an engineer comes to us and goes, I'm looking, even if obviously that we work with that company like that, we can't do anything about that because they've come to us and said we're looking. But most of the time, how we find candidates is the same with you guys with recommendations. So we'll place someone and then they'll come to us and go, oh, you place so and so, just thought I'd ring up and say, like, ask if they're like if you can look out for this position. But if I'm honest with you, we find that the more attraction is when people aren't desperately looking, because they actually want to go into a role and they're not like desperate to jump out of their job. So they end up going to a position that they actually not rushing, and they end up going to like a progressive role rather than just go into a role just because they need to pay the bills the next month.
Unfortunately, there's a few unscrupulous agencies out there. Again, I'll talk about my experience as an engineer. So I was an engineer 5 years ago. My placement within Stanley, I was placed via a rival company to yours. And I think the last phone call I had, well, via LinkedIn, I am still bombarded, even though I'm clearly not an engineer anymore. I'm still asked if I'm interested in engineering fairly regularly.
Yeah.
I will be cold called numerous times by a number of agencies to the point where I've blocked numbers.
Yeah.
I have had my engineers approach me numerous times to say, I am being offered this role with this company by this agency. Unfortunately, your side of the business is a big problem with retention. I'm no way blaming you guys for this.
No, I understand.
It's cutthroat. You guys are offering a sales. You're trying to get sales, but you're not particularly well regulated, your industry, and you're not particularly well managed to a certain extent as a whole.
There's some agencies. I mean, like maybe
we won't name them, but there are some.
There's some agencies, and to be fair, we may have done it, but we're a small company, so we try and keep our name, because I think once you get that name, it's like with any of your companies in terms of services, once you get that name, it's really hard to then go, okay, I want to work with you, because we want as many people to work with us as possible. So it's hard because we need to find the engineers. We've got pressure from people going, I want this engineer, whatever, and then you don't want to, obviously, excuse my language, piss off the clients that you're working with, and like you said, it's incestuous. So, but there is so many agencies that will, and it frustrates me, and I know we've spoke about it previously, that will get a CV, spam it out, ping it out everywhere, ping it out to the company that they've worked with, the company that they're currently working with, like their company working for, they've not even spoke to them. And
I famously got rung up by a company who tried to place me as an engineer for Stanley whilst I was the service manager for Stanley, which I had to explain I wasn't willing to take it.
We try. So we do, when we speak to people, we do like a full reg, and we ask like whether, like what companies they wouldn't work for, what companies they've got interviews with as well, because that's another thing. If you're already interviewing, like, it's just wasting your time. If you're going, I've got this really good guy, and but I'm already interviewing with him anyway. Like, it's just the whole, some of the processes are just, they try and do it to save time, but in the long run, it just messes the agent, that their time, and that some, I think agencies are meant to take work away from you, not add work. But at the same time, you'll get agencies that just are no good. The same with fire and security companies. You get them everywhere, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
But trust me, we hear what the things we hear that agencies have done. I'm like, I can't believe you're still running. Like half of them.
This is why we're offering this retention as well. It's not just about, in the industry, it's not just about hiring people, it's also helping businesses that are struggling to retain their staff, working with them to help them. And this is why this call's been put together, to kind of discuss strategies for retaining staff, because if we can retain our staff and they stay in our business, then we wouldn't be looking for new staff and they wouldn't be leaving for other jobs. So it's just thinking about ideas on what we could do, because it is, engineers go from one company to another, and I'm sure you've all experienced it. So it's what we can do in the industry and as companies to help retain them.
I think yourselves knowing, because I think retention is, you need it starting above the engineer, at management level. So for yourselves, I mean, do you recruit managers?
Yeah, we do.
So I think you placing a good manager
helps, doesn't it?
would be a big way to keeping retention of the engineers that you then place with that company.
Because I was literally going to go on to that, because I think people think staff retention is just engineers, but it's people like yourselves that are being retained in that company, and your attitude towards the company and the job. Because if you don't like it, then none of your engineers are going to like it, are they?
Exactly, and like
yourselves all sound like yourselves all sound very passionate about what you do. So in terms of the engineers that you're working with, people don't just leave a job, they leave most of the time, they leave a manager, don't they? Or they leave, it's not just a job, half the time it's the people, isn't it?
It is, and you've also got on the other side of that, if an engineer, for instance, doesn't get, I mean, you might be asking for a pay rise and he might be asking above his pay grade, and you think, well, you're not actually worth that. And, so sometimes you do have to let people move on to
I was literally about to say, I think we've got to a point in the industry where the engineers know how many opportunities there are, so they just go around and they go, someone rings them up, for instance a recruitment agency, I'm going to give you an extra $1,000, and they're like, yeah, cool,
not all about money, Maddy.
And then, no, I know it isn't, but this is what the way that they're looking at it. And maybe it's the younger people that are thinking, oh, I'm just going to get a couple of grand extra.
With some very young people I've experienced, they're demanding high money, but they just haven't got the technical ability. And on the flip side of that, you've got people who've been with the company 15 years and they're struggling to get up to the pay grade that other people are being offered in the industry. But
that is, do you know what, that is so key at the moment. We've got sometimes situations where we've got experienced engineers training junior engineers, and the junior engineers are on more than your experienced engineers. Now, that is a massive red flag, because if you're going to pay anyone off, it's that experienced engineer that you've entrusted to train that new person, that they've just found out that he's on a higher salary. Within 24 hours, he's going to get fed up, and that he's going to then start looking.
This is why I know talking about wages is something that really is personal and shouldn't be done, but it does get spoken about. Yeah. But you need to have the right culture in your company to, okay, yes, the industry is going to change and the annual salaries are going to go up, and you might bring someone on a £1,000 or £2,000 more, but you've still got to be putting the effort into your original staff that you've got to make sure that they get into where they should be, in line with the people you're bringing in. If they trust you and you're doing that for them, then you're onto a winner.
Do you, just a question to all of you, really, do you incentivize any of your experienced engineers to do that training, or to see that new person through their training? So if they complete their training, do they get a bonus, or do you
it's like we operate on a grading scale. Okay. So if they say, for instance, complete training on a fire alarm analog system, then they'll move up to the next grade, and the next grade comes with an additional amount of pay. So it's easy to see where you're going and how to achieve it.
And is that visible to everybody? Because I know in some companies, pay is almost one of those things that no one likes to show or share. And coming from a L&D background, a HR background, I think if that's visible and people can see that learning path, and with that learning path, there's pay increases.
Well, Marla was just going through the process of putting this in place. Right. So you've assessed all the engineers, because obviously we know, or we've found out, this, wages is a problem. Yeah. So to keep it fair and above board, let's get a grading system in place. When it's all finished being put in, it's all visible, and you can see where you need to go next.
Just out of interest, Greg, how long did that take you to do, to grade all your current?
It's taken a good 6 months so far. It's not a 5-minute process, and you need insight into the engineers. You need to know their skill sets, and you need, so there's a lot of work that goes into it.
Kevin, did you say you do the same as well?
Well, we did this exercise about 5-6 years ago. So we called it banding. So where the engineer starts on year 1 is not necessarily where he's going to be on year 8, because that was the old way of approach. Was where you started is where you stuck, which was unfortunate, and it sort of links into where we were talking about before there. If you've got an engineer that's got an appetite to learn, to achieve, then the banding system will support that and it'll elevate through. In our sort of company, it's a little bit harder to do the training, because every region's different, every customer base is different. So the banding is an encompassing tool, but it can be massaged in the region that the engineer is working. But yeah, that is in isolation. And just going back to your question, which you related to, which was retaining staff. We've got the banding that the engineer can commit to over every 2 years. You can go through the process if you want to, or if you're happy where you are, you can just stand on your laurels, you know. But behind the scenes there, you've got your PDRs that happen every 6 months. That is not financial focused. That is pure training. That is development. That is getting communication with the engineer and capturing where does the engineer want to go. When I mentioned training, but it's also, I think Jonathan mentioned it earlier on, you mentioned about where does the engineer want to be in 5-10 years' time? Does he want to be in sales, or does he want to be as a project manager? So the development is part of the retention, because yes, you may lose him as a service engineer, and whilst we're talking about service engineers, because that's where we know most of, but some of the team go into other roles and move on. So finally, the pay bit for us within our business model, we do review once a year, and that's across the board. But your PDRs feed into that. Yeah. If you're doing well and you're looking good and you're doing everything we need you to do, and the customers like you, and you get all the customer support and recommendations, that feeds into the pipeline to see that guy's successful and deserves a 3% pay rise, or whatever it may be. So certainly banding, training, and PDRs hand in glove with potential future prospects.
It's not all about money for some people as well. It's being treated right, and it's, you know,
that's that's number one. Normally, when you look at why people are leaving or why they're not staying with companies, I would say that money is probably about 4th on the list.
Yeah.
You know, number one is definitely how they're being treated and whether or not they like their job or the company is number one. Number 2 is development, you know, and it's not just, let me go on lots of training courses. It's people wanting to see that pathway, like Kevin was saying, well, where am I going to be in 5 years' time? Because if you naturally develop, your pay will go up with that development naturally anyway. And it is flexibility, and then pay comes into it. So pay is probably the 4th on the list. But I think when we talk about retention and retaining staff, it's that let's chuck more money at them. That will keep them. Would you agree, Jonathan?
I can say I've worked under both ways of doing things. I've worked under quite an opaque system where everyone was a bit cloak and dagger of who earned what and how much, and that can lead to its own problems. But also, I've seen the other side of it, and where we had a banding system, and this was when I was an engineer. And what I found, and this was a company problem more than anything, not the system, was it actually led some engineers to stagnate or to actually be disincentivized because the training wasn't there for them. Wow. And so they couldn't see how they were going to step into that next band. I think from what Greg and Kevin have said, they're gearing up to the training, which is exactly what you have to do with them. And we're now in the industry. I think the personal development is so much more important. And again, we're talking about retention. It's key to retention is to try and keep our engineers happy and involved. But this was going back probably 15 years ago, and it was hard to be, because you could see that some people were naturally, because of a location they were in or because of a requirement, they were getting that training, getting that pay increase, and it did that. You know, like I said, it led to engineers leaving because of that. But the problem is salary. Yes, we all want to work for a company that really looks after us, but salary is going to be important, as we do face a cost of living crisis in this country, and there are going to be engineers are going to have to make hard decisions. And I was going to ask you guys how you're finding this. Are you seeing a quite a steep raise in what pay is being offered now? Because obviously, you know, unfortunately, the larger the company, sometimes the slower it is to catch up. We are, and the engineers are, in a position of power at the moment, and so pay is going to become more and more important. Unfortunately, it's
so because we started to see it quite early on before the whole thing happened, because I think people were stressing, but we definitely, if people ask and they say, if they say that they're leaving because of money, for me it's a bit of a red flag, only because we always ask that question of, have you asked your company now? Like the company you're working for, have you asked them? Because we don't want to go through this whole process. We all know what happens. You get to the offer, and then they get counter offered, and then you're back to square one. You've just wasted half your time on recruiting someone to then get counter offered. And also, money can always be changeable, and it's transient. Whereas the company itself, if they don't like the company, then it's a bit of a different it's one.
Not going to change. I think
but we are definitely seeing like the amount, honestly, the money that people are asking for is an absolute joke.
I think certainly some of the businesses now are starting to see, whereas before, go back 5 years ago,
they were like, we can pay this.
Yeah, but we could also afford to lose an engineer, knowing there were other engineers to bring in. But now I think most businesses, if we're talking retention, now see that actually the cost of bringing a new engineer in to train them up, to get them ready, to fit them into the culture and the team, it's exponentially more than it costs to give that engineer that pay rise, especially when they deserve it. Not just, we'd all love to pay everybody more money. But we are a business, aren't we? So
I don't think it's attainable. Well, a company that's offering engineers, you know, well into the excess of what they should be paying, they've got to keep paying that engineer that money.
Yeah.
And if they're not bringing in a return to cover the wages, to me, it's a short-term solution for that company.
Yeah. I think that's what we've seen kind of like around, kind of like almost like a roundabout. So obviously, Jonathan, you said that people weren't paying it, then they was paying it. Now they're obviously trying to keep up with everything. They're also finding that now the more people offer people, the more higher it gets. It's just a spiral. It's a continuous spiral. So you can't keep continuously paying people more, because it's just going to keep going up and up and up, and no one's going to ever obtain it. And you obviously, like you said, Greg, you have to have the business to be able to bring these engineers on, to pay them on a monthly wage like that.
And if you look into the future, I mean, I think there's a recession being predicted for about 18 months' time. The companies that are paying the astronomical wages are going to be the ones that are going to suffer first.
So yeah, I definitely think when we do have people that are asking for loads of money, they're not our ideal candidate. And that everyone might be like, well, that's surprising, because recruitment agencies earn a fee out of the salary they're getting, but it's not, because half the time all they do is just get all these interviews, and they just go for the highest one, but it might not necessarily be the best company. They've just offered them 5k more, but you know that company is probably not the right thing, but you can't tell people, can you? They've got to make their own decisions.
I've got engineers, Maddy, who have been offered more money, but they know they're happy where they are and they won't move. So, you know, you need to start with the right culture in the company.
Yeah.
You can see the money climbers, because the CVs have many jobs on the back page. Yeah. So they're easily seeable. But we are going into a perfect storm almost. So you've got engineers demanding more, and clients want cheaper prices. So you'll end up
somewhere.
It will, and unfortunately, you'll be last first out, because they're the most expensive ones.
And when I get a CV, sorry, Jonathan.
No, I was going to say, Greg, go on.
I was just going to say, when I get a CV from an agency and it's got, you know, like X amount of jobs, he hasn't stayed there for more than 2 years, it's straight away it's a red flag for me.
Yeah.
I was going to say, with fixed overheads going up, fuel costs, the customer is going to realise this cost, and we're going to have a kickback, and it's going to happen. I think the other thing that has dramatically affected the industry, whilst we're talking sort of in vague terms, was with COVID. I seem to see a lot of engineers deciding to pick up the tools and going subcontracting.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think there was an awful lot of companies that saw subcontracting labour, especially through the COVID period, as an easy answer to keep their overheads down. And I think that's where we lost a lot of skill out of the permanent retention of engineers. Deciding that. Again, from the recruitment side, have you seen people changing their mind? I've spoken to a few guys who I know went, as I call it, out on the tools to become a subcontractor, and now maybe not liking that
so
decision
we had
as
that.
much.
We did have that. So when when COVID hit, obviously during COVID, everyone was like, I want my PAYE jobs, because obviously they wanted like the furlough and they wanted that stability. After COVID, they was like, oh, I quite like this kind of like doing a work for myself or whatever, and having the right freedom, because they wanted the freedom. But now with the whole petrol prices, obviously they're having to put day rates up. They're having to put like their whole rates up, their whole time. When they're struggling to get petrol. When the whole petrol thing happened, they were struggling to get petrol, which meant they couldn't work. Whereas as a company, you'd still get paid if you can't get petrol, because it's not your problem. So now we're seeing definitely like a spiral of now, hopefully seeing more subcontractors go back into permanent work, because I think they think it's easier, and then they realise it's not.
I think we all agree here that you should leave the subcontracting and come and get a nice permanent job, and
all the subcontractors
and feel the love from a wonderful service manager, basically.
But yeah, I think that's quite a nice subject to leave it on, to be fair. Charlotte, obviously, with your experience and stuff, what advice would you give people, and obviously the people on this webinar, on kind of retention and preparing for the next year in terms of
I just think
tips?
basically touching on what all of you have said, really, I think company culture is key. People don't necessarily leave, like we said, all the time for more money. You will get those people, but they tend to leave companies because they don't get on with people, or they just don't like the feel for the company. So people leave people, not necessarily leave the company. So I think culture is really, really key. And I think it goes back to some of the things we talked about in the attraction piece. It's sort of understanding your engineers and understanding them as people, understanding what they've got going on outside of work as well, and taking that time to get to know them. And it's not just, here's a list of jobs, off you go, do them. And if you're lucky, I'll say thank you at the end of the day. So I think that is also key, as well as, like you were saying, that development and pathway for the engineer is visible. So if we're promising them that we're going to be delivering them training, that we stick, or whatever we're promising them, I definitely think sticking to those promises. So never overpromise someone something if you can't achieve, I think would be my advice.
Yeah, you're definitely better off not saying anything.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys agree or not, but they would be my key things going into next year, really. Just sticking to your plans and having that plan. Sometimes we sort of, the next year comes and we haven't really got a plan, and we're all sort of firefight. So it's maybe having a plan and forward thinking, and just not over promising things to engineers, and I think they would then stay.
No worries. Thanks everyone, obviously, for coming on the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone who's watching. There will be a video recording as well that will be going out, which I shan't be watching because I don't want to see my recording. But yeah, there will be a recording, so if anyone's obviously missed it, or if anyone on the webinar has people that might want to obviously see it as well, we'll be sending a link out as well, and there'll also be stuff on LinkedIn in regards to like snippets and stuff like that of obviously what we've been spoke about. But thank you for everyone who's watching, and have a great night. Thank you.